You bought peonies, maybe two, maybe three. You planted them in the fall thinking spring would bring you those enormous, ridiculous, dinner plate flowers you see all over Pinterest. Spring came. You got leaves, maybe a couple buds that went brown before they opened. The next year, same story. Year 3. The plant is still alive, but it looks exactly the same as it did the day you put it in the ground. Small, unimpressive, not doing much. Most people at this point decide they're just not a peony person. They dig them up, replace them with something easier, and move on. That's a shame, because the problem almost certainly wasn't the plant. Peonies are actually one of the most long-lived perennials you can grow. There are documented peony plants over 100 years old, still flowering every spring in the same spot. The same spot. Nobody replanted them, nobody moved them. They just stayed there, outliving every person who ever cared for them. So why does yours look half dead? Almost always, it comes down to 5 specific mistakes, and none of them are complicated to fix once you know what you're looking for. Stay with me through secret number 4 especially. That's the one that explains why perfectly healthy peonies suddenly stop blooming for years at a time, and almost nobody gets told the real reason. If you want to learn how to get more from your garden without spending a fortune doing it, subscribe. Every week we cover exactly this kind of thing, practical, specific, and actually useful. Hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Secret 1. You planted it too deep, and that's why it refuses to bloom. This is the most common mistake with peonies, and it's almost invisible because the plant looks completely fine. It's growing, it has leaves, it just never flowers. The reason is depth. Peonies grow from roots that have small pink or red buds on them called eyes. These eyes need to sit very close to the soil surface to bloom, no more than 1 to 2 inches below ground in most climates. In warm climates, some gardeners plant them with the eyes barely covered at all, maybe half an inch down. When those eyes are buried 3 or 4 inches deep, which is what feels natural when you're planting a bare root, the plant spends all its energy on foliage and essentially never produces flowers. It's not sick, it's not dying, it's just stuck in survival mode at the wrong depth. This is also why peonies often bloom beautifully the first year after purchase. Nurseries pot them at the right depth, and then when you transplant them, you inadvertently bury them too deep trying to get them properly established. If your peony has been in the ground for more than 2 years without blooming, dig it up carefully in autumn after the foliage dies back. Examine the root, find the eyes, replant it so those eyes sit no more than 1.5 inches below the soil surface. Just that adjustment, nothing else, often brings a non-blooming peony into full flower the following spring. It sounds almost too simple. It isn't. Depth is everything with peonies. Secret 2. They hate competition more than almost any other garden plant. Peonies are not good neighbors. They have a deep, wide root system that spreads out horizontally as much as downward, and they're extremely sensitive to having that root zone crowded by other plants. Plant a peony within 18 inches of a shrub, a large ornamental grass, or even aggressive perennials like salvia or rudbeckia, and you'll see it slowly underperform. Fewer blooms each year, smaller flowers, stems that fall over more easily, eventually just a declining plant that nobody can figure out. The solution is simple, but requires some restraint in planting. Give each peony at least 2 feet of clear space in every direction, nothing competing for the same soil. When you mulch around them, and you should mulch, keep the mulch pulled back a couple of inches from the crown of the plant itself. Mulch touching the crown holds moisture in exactly the wrong place, and can cause the crown to rot over time. The other competition issue nobody mentions is trees. Peonies and trees share the same goal, establishing a deep, wide root network, and they're doing it in the same soil. A peony planted within the drip line of a mature tree will always lose. If you've ever wondered why the peonies along a fence next to a large tree look terrible while the ones in an open bed thrive, that's the reason. Open ground, full sun, no competition. That's the environment they evolved to dominate. Secret 3. Full sun is not optional, and partial shade is slowly killing your plant. Peonies are sometimes described as tolerating partial shade, and technically that's true. They survive in it. But surviving and thriving are not the same thing. A peony that gets fewer than 6 hours of direct sun per day will produce progressively fewer flowers over time. The stems get longer and weaker as the plant reaches for more light. The flowers that do appear are smaller. The plant becomes more susceptible to botrytis, a fungal disease that turns buds brown and stems gray before they ever open. And because the decline is gradual, most people don't connect it to the light. They assume it's a watering issue or a soil issue, and start making adjustments that don't help. 6 hours is the minimum, 8 is better. A spot that gets morning sun and afternoon shade will work reasonably well. Afternoon sun with morning shade works too. What doesn't work is the dappled broken light under a tree canopy or the shadow of a tall fence for most of the day. Before you plant, spend a day actually watching how much direct sun that spot receives. Not just it seems sunny there. Count the hours. Most garden beds receive less sun than their owners believe, especially once neighboring plants mature and cast more shade than they used to. If your peony is currently in too much shade, autumn is the time to move it. Dig it carefully, getting as much root as possible, and replant it somewhere that genuinely gets that 6 to 8 hours. Peonies transplant surprisingly well in autumn when the foliage is dying back, and moving one to a better spot is always worth doing rather than leaving it somewhere it can't perform. Secret 4. Botrytis is destroying your buds, and you can prevent all of it. This is the one that breaks people's hearts every spring. You waited all year. The buds formed. They got big and full, and you could almost see the color starting to show through. And then they went soft, brown, and collapsed before a single one opened. That's botrytis blight. It's a fungal disease, and it thrives in wet springs with poor air circulation. The spores overwinter in old plant material, reactivate in cool, damp conditions, and spread to buds just as they're forming. The prevention is completely manageable, but you have to do it at the right time. First, and most important, cut the foliage all the way to the ground in autumn. Every stem, every leaf, remove it from the garden entirely. Don't compost it, bag it, and throw it away. The fungal spores live in that dead material, and if you leave it on the ground or in a compost pile nearby, you're guaranteeing the same problem next year. Second, in very early spring, before growth really starts, spray the emerging shoots and surrounding soil with a copper-based fungicide. This is organic and widely available, and applied at the right time it creates a barrier that dramatically reduces botrytis infections. Repeat once more when the stems are about 6 inches tall. Third, if buds still get hit despite this, remove the infected material immediately and dispose of it. Don't leave brown, soft stems on the plant hoping they'll recover. They won't, and they'll spread the spores to healthy growth. The ants you see on your peony buds, by the way, are not a problem. They're feeding on a natural sugary secretion the buds produce, and they're completely harmless to the plant. You do not need to remove them. Ignore them and focus on the fungal issue instead. Secret 5. The variety you chose determines everything about your success. This is the conversation that almost never happens at the garden center, and it should happen before any of the others. Peonies are sold as a single category, as if they're all essentially the same. They're not. The differences between peony types are significant enough that choosing the wrong one for your climate or your expectations will set you up to fail regardless of how well you do everything else. There are 3 main types worth knowing. Herbaceous peonies are the classic garden varieties. They die back completely to the ground each winter and re-emerge every spring. These are the most cold-hardy, the most forgiving, and the ones that suit most home gardens. They need a genuine winter dormancy period with cold temperatures, which is why they don't do well in warm climates like Florida or Southern California. If you're in a cold winter zone, herbaceous varieties like Sarah Bernhardt, Carl Rosenfield, or Festiva maxima are genuinely hard to kill once established correctly. Tree peonies are a completely different plant. They're woody shrubs that don't die back in winter. They're more expensive, slower to establish, and require completely different pruning. They're spectacular when they bloom, often with flowers larger than your hand, but they're not a beginner plant, and they're not interchangeable with herbaceous varieties. Ito peonies, sometimes called intersectional peonies, are a hybrid of the two. They die back like herbaceous peonies but produce tree peony-style flowers on sturdier stems that don't flop over. They're more expensive than standard herbaceous varieties but considerably easier to manage than true tree peonies. For someone who wants something a step above the common garden peony without the difficulty of tree peonies, Itos are worth the extra cost. The other variety decision that matters is whether you want early, mid, or late season bloomers. Peony season runs about 6 weeks total, and if you plant only mid-season varieties, you get 6 weeks of flowers. Plant a mix of early, mid, and late varieties, and you can have continuous blooms from late April through June, depending on your climate. Nurseries rarely explain this, and most people end up with all mid-season varieties because they buy whatever's flowering in the store at the time. Know what type you're getting before you buy it. Know what your climate requires. And if you can, buy from a specialist nursery rather than a general garden center. The variety selection is wider, the root quality is usually better, and the staff can actually answer the question of which varieties perform well in your specific region. 5 secrets. And now you have a much clearer picture of why peonies fail in most gardens and what to do about it. Plant at the right depth. Eyes 1 inch below the surface, not 3. Give them space, and keep competitors out of their root zone. Put them somewhere that gets real, honest sunlight for at least 6 hours a day. Cut everything to the ground in autumn and deal with botrytis before it deals with your buds. And choose the right variety for where you live and what you're expecting. Do those 5 things and you're not managing a difficult plant. You're just giving a very tough, very long-lived plant the basic conditions it needs to do what it already wants to do. If you found this useful and you want to keep learning how to get more out of your garden without spending more than you need to, subscribe. We're here every week covering exactly this: the plants people struggle with, the real reasons why, and what actually fixes it. The next video is worth sticking around for.